opportunities and challenges. And my name is Mercy. I'm the HR business partner, and I work at Odessa. So I'm your tech host for this session, and I'll be guiding you all with any technology challenge or with any help that you all might need. So just quick pro tips throughout the session to keep it more engaging and lively. Please use the emoticons icon there to continue to cheer for our speakers. When you agree or resonate with any points that they're sharing, go ahead and share all your cheers to our speakers, and let's make the session very engaging and lively for each one of us over here. And every time you have a comment that you'd like to share with our speakers, please type that into our feed section that you can see towards the right hand side of the screen. And you can also see the Q&A section there, where you can type in the questions that you feel must be answered by our panelists through the end of the session. So with that, I think we can go ahead and begin. And I'd like to turn things to Mr. Vikas, who's our anchor and moderator for the panel session today. So Vikas Chaturvedi, who's the COO and EEP of IIM Ahmedabad. Over to you, Vikas. Please take it on.
Thank you so much, Mercy. And before we move forward, just quickly, would we be able to see all of us together on the screen, or can we just sort of go ahead with this and then we can get started?
Sure, we can go ahead with this. I'll see what I can do from the back end.
So, hello everyone, whoever's joining us, listening to us, and almost a good afternoon to everybody. And that includes my panel here and people who are joining us from the HR fraternity and beyond across the country, I suppose. I lead executive education at IIM Ahmedabad. At IIM Ahmedabad, I don't want to speak too much about it. Everybody knows IIMA, but essentially, the idea is to keep this whole academia practitioner feedback loop alive. So it's a bit like academics do research, and then before that they go to practitioners. Practitioners tell them what's going on, and that life goes on. And especially in these interesting times, on the panel we have actually a power-packed group with plenty of experience. So I start with Seema, and Seema will just say hello to everybody. She's a board of director member at Mahindra's. I like to say that she's working in a diversified group, but she focuses on defense, aerospace, agriculture, or agro. Am I correct, Seema? Is that right?
Absolutely, Vikas. Bang on. Thank you.
So we have Seema with us. So the word we'll use for her is diversified. She'll talk about the experience there. We have TK Srirang, who's the CHRO at ICICI Bank. Hi, Sri, are you there? Can we just see you for a moment if we can? Otherwise, ICICI Bank, again, one of the largest private banks in India. We all know agility is a word that can be attached very easily to both the sector and the firm itself. We have Madhvi Lal. Madhvi Lal is the MD CHRO at Deutsche Bank. Again, from financial services, she's a experienced financial services hand for a long time. She's very well known in both the HR and the financial circles. And then we have Amit, who's going to join us in a bit, who's the CHRO at Volvo, which is automotive. Again, so that's another interesting sector. Now, as we know, everybody's business model in one way has evolved. So things are not as they used to be. And what I've learned at IIM Ahmedabad and other places is that if you look at things like even remote working, that is what we could now call as an Uber phenomena. It's just happened. That's just the way we all work. That's the way we interact with its perils and otherwise. So that was one part of life, but clearly all business models have seen some evolution. And I think it's quite rapid. It suddenly happened. And now people think about how to both, first the idea was to tide over it. And then the next thing is to benefit from it really. And how can we kind of stay competitive, kind of move ahead of the curve, move ahead of the competition. So those things are important. In the time that we have, I'll moderate the discussion between the group, but the idea would be really to learn from everyone's experiences here. And I think it's not just for people who are, in a sense, silent and listening to us, but also I think all of us together. And I and Madhvi and others were speaking, we're as keen to hear from each other and from the experiences. So treat this like a more informal, I suppose, a community coffee table conversation. So the first thing I wanted to do was we've all kind of seen the topic, which is evolving business models and kind of a SWOT around it, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, whatever. So before I move into specific questions, I just wanted to give every person on the panel a minute or so for their top of the mind thoughts on it. So when you saw the topic, what kind of what was running through your mind? I'll just start with Seema, I think first, just in the interest of keeping a sequence going, and then over to Madhvi. So the ladies will go first, and then we'll move ahead. So Seema.
Thank you so much, Vikas. Good afternoon, everyone. Finally, we are meeting like this, so I'm glad we could make it. See, for me, I come from a very diversified, as Vikas said earlier, background. And very recently, this agri part of HR has also been added to my responsibility. So when we talk about evolving business model, I think over the last 1 year, though we've been talking about how to evolve, what could be the disruption, how would it happen, and we were all preparing for the past many years for that disruption to happen. And when it actually happened last year in the form of pandemic, we were like all going berserk here and there. Finally, we could get hold of it. And just to tell you a little bit about my background, I come from, as you could see in my introduction, from aero, defense, and agri. So we are in primarily the emergency services, essential services. So throughout the year, we were working from the front, We never had any day off. Of course, some of us like HR, finance, legal, those enabling functions were having work from home. But as far as our people in the front end, operations people, they were all working there even at the peak time of COVID, wave 1 when it started. In real manner. No. Back to you, Vikas.
No, absolutely. I think we've all, we've just all had to evolve quickly. And on a lighter note, my name is Vikas. So that would always come up as, do something, change something. That's been the hallmark of things here.
I think the developments in genetics, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, 3D printing, biotechnology, and just so many of them, I think all these are building and amplifying one another. And I think, personally, I think there'll be a revolution. Sort of handle the whole issue around supply chain management to climate change, etc. And I think because you spoke about Uberization, so the rise of sharing economy, so we've already seen monetization of everything from empty house to empty car, and God knows where that will go. I mean, there are just so many options there of monetizing, sort of a lot of stuff that out there. And I'm sure there'll be creative, people coming up with newer and newer things in that. So I personally think that these changes obviously, I think, mean a lot of future prosperity because there'll be a lot of job creation. But I think there'll also be very major challenges because the speed of change, like Seema said, is so fast. And, we really need to build that proactive adaptation at many levels, corporations, governments, societies, and individuals. And I think as new industries come forward and new technologies make possible new industries, many occupations and roles will undergo transformation. So to my mind, I think this whole technological, socio-economic, geopolitical, and all the demographic developments and the whole interconnections between them will generate new categories of jobs. And some will get displaced, but there'll also be new creation. So that's what came to my mind when I, thought of this topic.
And thank you for sharing also your optimism that jobs will be created and as lives change and get disrupted. I think that's a very noble sentiment. Really, any crisis will, as Winston Churchill said, never let a crisis go to waste. I think most people are trying to somehow do that, and I think people are now realizing that new life will be created, new work. As you said, the idea of sharing, Uberization, those things are happening. I go back to you, Madhvi, for a moment, and if Srirang is able to join us, maybe we'll take a banking or a financial services view on this. Now, because HR has HR BPs and business partners who work regularly with retail or with corporate banking or whatever. In terms of purely the sheer business model itself, do you think there's been a change? Is there a way that they handle things differently now, and that could be both from a cost or a revenue perspective? Anything that you can tell us?
No, definitely I can give you my thoughts, and I think Srirang will definitely be able to give you much more on that. But just to step back a bit, even before this current situation of the pandemic, emerged, I think this whole advancement in technology was already doing a lot for all the industries, and banking is no different, right? And from a banking perspective, tech has been the biggest sort of, if you call it, driver of change, or a reason for changing. And I personally think that for banking, what has made a huge difference is the India Stack, and that has sort of ensured that we go through transformation every single day, and the fact that we can achieve higher banking penetration without actually building the physical infrastructure is a great opportunity. So in the past, there used to be always this, I've got 1,000 branches, I've got 15 branches, I'm going to 100. That whole concept has sort of been turned on its head, now it's really about how do we use the India Stack, which I talked about, which is the Jan Dhan accounts, the e-authentication, increased mobile penetration, and the Aadhaar-based authentication, and the unique identification process. I think if you can leverage all that, I think banking can actually really become, it's futuristic, totally paperless, pretty quick. Right now, it does take time to open an account or, even do a transaction, though the cycle time has reduced in many transactions, but it'll become more instant, more real time, and obviously cost effective because you're not investing in the physical infrastructure. I think the other thing that's happening in the banking industry is this whole concept of partnership with fintech, to sort of really augment the offerings of the bank. So earlier fintechs were identified as only for payments, but now they are into lending, insurance, wealth management, and something called open banking, which is emerging. So I think lots and lots of exciting developments in the banking space. For people in the audience who want to sort of know more about this, there are many reports available online, which will tell you a lot of what the future of banking will look like.
Thank you for sharing this. And, before I go to Seema, I had a question, and maybe if Srirang was there, I would have asked him this. But because my exposure is across sectors, so I'm kind of sector agnostic where I sit in a quasi-academic role. Do you think that banking and financial services was more prepared for this crisis and this evolution than the others? Is that your sense? And then I'll ask a few questions of Seema around her business model. But do you think they were kind of more tech enabled already or moving in this direction? Do you feel that they've handled this better?
See, I can't comment on whether the banking industry was more tech enabled to handle it, but I think the banking industry, like most industries, really sort of transformed very rapidly, in March last year. To make sure that they were able to offer what the services are without actually having people coming into the office. So I would say most industries adapted very, very quickly. Some, of course, because of their business proposition, had challenges because sometimes some industries require really people to be there in the office to sort of deliver. But I wouldn't say that any industry was ahead. I think it's just that, I think the human brain is very powerful and human intent is very powerful. So I think, we obviously have a huge technology infrastructure, but even we were not very sure when we announced when the lockdown was announced. Actually, we had gone into working from home even before the lockdown because we had learned the experience from China. And nobody thought it's going to be possible to have 12,000 people working from home. And in a matter of, I would say, 10 days, the whole organization just sort of turned into, a sort of a virtual organization. And I would say the speed was phenomenal. I think individuals adapted, the organization supported, but it just all came together,
Absolutely. Over to you, Seema. I think in terms of the question I have, I know you have multiple sectors, so you can take your choice. But, of the three areas that you handle specifically of agro, defense, and airspace or aero, as you called it, one or two of these which have seen a big shift because of this, and where you think that the way they operated, actually, the operating system has somewhat transformed. Your thoughts and your thinking on that?
Absolutely. I think that's a great shift in all the three. So I come from Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan sector of Mahindra and Mahindra. That's how I would like to call it, where we have agri and defense, where we work for the armed forces, nation building in their capacity and all that. So over the last 1 year, I'm now talking very, very specific. So if I talk about agriculture, we've seen the kind of upheaval happening very, very recently. So I won't comment on that, but that does affect. So this is another kind of disruption coming, where we are really helping farmers to produce better and buy their produce and trade it, So in some way, we are helping them in our own way. And there I could see a lot of shift. In the sense, I'll give you an example. We have one unit under agriculture where they are into chemicals for the for the farmers,
Right.
manufacturing. Yeah. So immediately they shifted to sanitizers, and we started working on sanitizers, manufacturing, selling internally, externally. So immediate shift. I think this didn't even take a month. So we were ready there. And I'm sure you must have seen in the media where Mr. Anand Mahindra also stated that we would like to support the country by these products, whether they were ventilators being produced in our auto sector, sanitizers in our chemical plant, Now, as far as defense is concerned, just to share with the audience and with you, I don't think it's so much in the public domain for obvious reasons, the kind of work we do. So here we are into emergency services. For instance, we have 3 states right now working with UP, Rajasthan, and going to be Maharashtra, where we have dialed 112 services and 7 services. And even during this pandemic, there was a big rush. I mean, I'll give you an example of our UP project, where we have more than 500 communication women officers working, and then their family won't allow them to come to work, right? Because they come from a belt where, families were not very comfortable allowing them. So you won't believe, within a month, again, we shifted them to work from home. And I think this happened first time in the world where you their respective residences, and they were doing it. And in fact, we got applauded because there was not even a single technical glitch, no complaint that their calls were not being taken by them. So I think that was a big shift. If I talk about the armed forces side, the kind of manufacturing we do for the armored vehicles, for the underwater, for the Navy, and for radar manufacturing for the Air Force, training this Air Force pilots. So we do a lot of work, a lot of classified work we do, and all of them came handy at this stage. We all know what is happening at the India-China border, right? So all in some way we were supporting, and everybody was working round the clock. So we learned as an organization that there is वो बोलते हैं ना, जब सर पे पड़ती है तो काम अपने आप हो जाता है, right? So we learned this. This is possible. I thought I'll share it with you and with the audience.
It's a very nice, I think, viewpoint, because while we speak of commercial models and how are you doing business differently and all that, the other side is also that there was a big brick and mortar reality. People just turning up for work. They had no way of knowing how to work otherwise. So giving them some kind of a way forward on that, I think, has been important in many cases For example, there are unions, there are other people, they want to know how will they operate. So that's, I think, a thing that comes up. I think you also shared that, people come together in moments of struggle and crisis. And in the work that I do, this is known as the rallying effect. So what happens is, people just rally together. It's a bit like, there's a car breakdown and, you call anybody who's around you and everybody starts to push. I hope nobody has a car like that anymore. But were that the case, then people come together and, kind of see it through. So I think that's very helpful to understand. I think one point that I'll take, and Madhvi, maybe you can add to this for a moment. I think all organizations have started to take a more humane view or a societal view. Compared to an earlier time where, you were doing it was business as usual and you did other things in a secondary way. But now people do talk about how are we kind of shifting our services or products to benefit everybody a little bit. So similar to what she said, I think, in terms of, helping the national case or supporting regionally. So anything you want to add to that in terms of some initiatives and things you guys have run?
Well, I think because I love the word rallying around, and that probably I think sums up with what I described about how people just came together. We had somebody from technology who actually delivered laptops to people's houses. And that's like not easy. I mean, there was no courier service available. Actually, loading into a car and supplying the laptops and things like that. I mean, people went above and beyond the call of duty to ensure that everything was working smoothly. And I think for me, and you talk as you were talking, I was thinking about it, and you're right. There's been a shift in terms of this whole approach by organizations. To be obviously the organizations have been humane, but even to be more humane. And I think organizations have something I always think. Have moved beyond employee engagement right now to employee reassurance. And there's been a heightened focus on sort of well-being. And I think that organizations understand that you have to support employees, through this crisis. So, and people say working from home is an issue and is a challenge. And yes, it is a challenge, but we have to understand that today working from home is a challenge because there's also the fear of COVID on top of that, right? So there's working from home, which has its challenges. Plus you've got the fear of COVID. Plus you've got looking after your children or elders in there. So organizations have to take cognizance of all these factors, So I think apart from providing the standard technological or the financial support or, whatever, I think there has been a shift to provide a lot of the emotional or mental health, support to people, and I'll tell you a couple of interesting. I mean, I can go on and on. This is a very, very interesting topic. But early on in the during the pandemic months, the managers really went above and beyond in terms of reaching out to staff. But they also realized that the workplace has changed for people. The workplace includes the families. So there were these some very brilliant mind which came up with this idea of having something called story trails for children. Basically, a senior leader would, take time off their schedule and do a storytelling session for children 2 to 7 years old, and obviously tell it in a very interesting manner. And that became a huge success. I mean, with the children, with the parents. So I think organizations started doing a lot of creative stuff around, going beyond what the standard engagement.
Absolutely, and I concur with this because I've had places which have sent not just laptops for working, but even ergonomic chairs, because they realize that all of us are getting older, and at least some of us are, not the ladies on the panel, but I am, and so you need a better chair. And these things are, again, all these things are sort of in their own way, if you do these quickly, are also agile. So it's agility is not just about the whole process and the whole business model, but really things like these. A question I have, I think, I was thinking about this for a bit. Now we've seen that, we are working in a new way now. And if you were to, speak for your sectors, maybe Seema can go first, or, it's open to either one. What's the biggest opportunity there now? So this is the way we work. These are the limitations, or this is the new game. When you talk to your CEOs or you talk to other people, what are the big opportunities that they want people to focus on business-wise or otherwise? Any thoughts? Think for a minute, moment, if you like. Yeah.
Sure. No, I think it has given us a lot of opportunities. First is it has reassured. I'll use this word what Madhvi used, reassurance, that yes, we can do it. Whatever may come, we'll do it. I think that's the biggest, that's the starting point when it instilled that kind of confidence, not in your employees, even in your management teams, leadership team, they could do it, and we have done it actually. And I think this was the best time we used for capability building for our people, right? So would it be working from home, multitasking? I know there was a little toll on them for multitasking, which we have taken care in some other way, which I'll share it with you later. But yes, it has again given them reassurance that yes, organization is there to really support you. And we have seen new skills emerging from this pandemic situation. So
Right.
we could see that yes, our employees are capable of doing this as well. Maybe we never utilize them. We never exploited those or extracted those. That's the right word. I'll give you an example. For instance, at one of our plants, where I'm talking about last year in March, when this just started, and he came up with innovative ideas of using, instead of using the tap with hand, they used it with a pedal, and now it is seen everywhere.
Yeah.
He was the first one in our organization to come up with that. So, and I think this time people use their creativity, their innovation. That was at the best possible, I would say that. Yeah. I have a lot of examples. I think it'll take me a few hours to share what we did. And I think one more thing I would like to share, because a lot of audience are from HR background. So especially for HR for HR, we learned that we can also go beyond our just regular employee engagement, learning and grow. There are many ways we could really support employees and their families. And we did that.
No, excellent. And again, reskilling, new skills, capability building, using the time to, I would think even literally refresh yourself. We've seen, in the academic end, I sit here, I see people, they sometimes do get the time. After all, you're not traveling, after all, you're not commuting every day. And that gives people time to sometimes think for themselves and get back into some educational exercise for themselves or for their even teams and all that. So I think there's a case there to rethink your skills, rethink your the value that you bring. Madhvi, what do you feel are the opportunities that in banking leaders talk about through this, besides of course responding quickly to tech? And I have an additional question on this for the both of you, but before that, any thoughts, Madhvi?
Okay, so before we go into the opportunities, I just want to say that I think we should all acknowledge that this pandemic has created a lot of issues for a lot of people. So I'm not talking about sectors that are represented on this call, but people who've lost their jobs, who had to migrate back. I think at some point we have to think about that workforce as well. The unorganized sector, or people who've just, the industries which are just shut down. I mean, if you go to a mall today, there are restaurants have closed. Obviously, where are those people gone, right? I mean, so I'm saying we must acknowledge that there's a large number of people who've been misplaced, who I don't know how they're managing, and I'm sure a lot of organizations are helping out. But there's a workforce outside this group that we should really figure out what to do about. So I just want to keep that aside, because we kind of being very optimistic. So I thought let me just park that and as a point as well. But in terms of opportunities, obviously for an organization like us on this call, there are a lot of opportunities. Obviously, like you said, technology is there. I think this whole experiment with working, with the gig economy, and I think that's really come to light. People have been talking about this future of work for years now. This whole thing of work from home, remote working, gig economy. I think we kind of it's been like a pilot last year to see that it's actually doable, right? And I think, Seema, I would agree with you. For us as an organization at Deutsche Bank, we've obviously always had a focus on virtual learning, but we did have a lot of classroom training as well. I think this last year we further adapted our sort of learning models. we have a digital learning curriculum. We kind of revisited and reprioritized some of the learning there, and we've got some really stunning feedback in terms of how people have used that learning much more than earlier. Much more than earlier. And we have our learning model methodologies actually are very, very diverse. So we have, if you're a person who just takes 5 minutes, who just wants to learn something in 5 minutes, we have a 5-minute bite. We have a half an hour session. We have a 2-hour session. So I think people can sort of really learn on the go. So that's something we've done. I think this second opportunity we've had is that we've had our leaders actually become teachers. So we've got sessions called Leaders as Teachers, where leaders do sessions for staff, sharing their own experiences, whether it's technical or managerial or leadership skills, which again is a huge success because people hear right from their chain in terms of what are things that work and don't work. I think the other thing that I feel is for HR, I think specifically the opportunities to really use technology to take care of the basic HR processes. Again, we've been talking about it for a long time. We've kind of seen it happening last year. So when the lockdown was announced, this whole thing was, should we onboard people who we've made offers to, and how will we onboard them? Because we've never really onboarded somebody in another city. People have to come to the office and they fill forms and everything. So that whole virtual onboarding itself, I think, is become now a business as usual. Or for that matter, virtual interviews. We had to hire about 2,000 people last year. The question was, can we do virtual interviews? And obviously, all of us, me included, had this, how will we do virtual interviews? How will I know the person is right for the organization? But then that also got worked through, and we're doing virtual interviews. The managers are fine with that. We did campus interviews online.
Right.
For the first time. So I think there's just so much opportunity. But I think the other opportunity that I want to talk about, and I hope because I'm not taking too much time, is I think we've got to take the learnings that we've had from this whole episode forward as well. So, for example, if organizations do go for a hybrid model where they have workforce which is in office and workforce which is outside, I think you can tap into talent pools you've never tapped into, whether it's women who are not physically able to come to work, or differently able people who can't actually come into the work, or people from other cities where you're not really present. I think there's a huge talent pool that's going to be available. I think organizations that can tap that talent pool, I think, will be successful.
I think, Madhvi, your last point is amongst the strongest, that there is a big talent pool. Now that you work virtually, you can actually virtually employ anybody, in a manner of speaking, whether it's a gig or it's a project. So, those populations which were never visible can come to the fore. I think that's a big point. I think also thank you for the cautionary point, because clearly all is not well, as the Arogya Setu app or whatever says COVID abhi khatam nahi hua hai. So, back to work is not entirely certain. There is a case for managing uncertainty. And I think the other point I think both of you in a way make is that, this is something I look at IIMA doing as well, and which is, how do you make learning more immersive? Because ultimately, there's a value when you come physically somewhere, and, what I say is the question that I try to answer is, we have the lovely IIMA campus, the heritage campus behind me, and how do you take these memories away? It's important. People build memories and associations when they come. But over time, we are using technology to do that. But, there is never a substitute for the human experience, the physical experience of many things too. So that's there. One question I had, and, this is just, really my last one or two questions. Now, this question is, let's think of this as our people, which is, the organizations where we work, and then there are other people. And by other people, I mean, not the general society, which we've spoken about, and how we try to create benefit for them. That's a opportunity which pays back in another way also. Eventually people see you as good citizens for the community, and they will use your products, services, they will, enhance, share value in one way. But here, other people I talk about are specifically vendors, or, when you look at your customers. Now, one is, we are doing things for our employees, such as providing them chairs and laptops to be able to work from home. But do you have any examples of things that have been done for direct customers, let's say, or for your direct vendors to support them better? So anyone has any observations on that? Because that's also a part of the value chain. That would be nice for people to hear about. I'll go to Seema, then Madhvi can come back if you have any thoughts. So customers, and I said the middle of the chain, the vendors and other partners. Seema could speak to that with the manufacturing sense as well.
Sure, definitely. I think I could share one example with you. Now, for our aerostructures business, who's our client? Our client are basically all these Boeings and the Airbuses, because we manufacture and supply to them. So, what could we do differently for them? So, I think one thing which we don't like, but it is really coming handy, that a lot of workload being shared between us and them, you know. And I could see comments from Michael and Piyush where they're talking about learning and growth happening at this time. So this is the time we've been talking about it for many years, but we really could not prioritize this. And this was the time when we could prioritize that, where we talk about transfer of learning, share skills, reskilling. So here we tied up with our join hands with our clients, and we could do it together for their benefit as well as for our own employees' benefits. So this one example comes directly to my mind.
Madhvi, anything from your end in terms of for customers?
Well, I think it's a very, very good question, because I think from a customer point of view, what did the customers want during this, this whole lockdown, right? They wanted services that were same or better than pre-lockdown. We ensured that those services were there. They also wanted a lot of the no-touch services. I think the banking services has included that to make sure that our services don't suffer. Just for everybody's information, banking is an essential service. So our branches were open throughout. So we always had our branches fully staffed, for any customer who walked in. Though customers walked in very rarely, but the branches were open in case somebody wanted. The ATMs were obviously always full and capacitized. So I think from a services point of view, we ensured that no services suffered, whether it's in the corporate sector or the branch structure really. On the vendors, Vikas, very good question. So I think a couple of things we did was we also a lot of our staff now have actually gone. Some of them, who can't stay in their base locations, have actually moved out to either the hometowns or where they're comfortable living, right? Because obviously there were a lot of constraints, especially people who was, younger generation who were living in PGs, they were not allowed to stay there or they didn't have the facilities and they went back. We enabled that for our vendor staff as well. We told our vendors that if somebody wants to move to their hometown, please go ahead. We've approved that as well, and they can work remotely, which was a big shift for us, as well. And we have not impacted any vendor staff, during this pandemic. We've kept everybody.
Seema has something to add.
Yeah, I have one more example to share. I think it's in my mind. How could it? What we did was we raised some funds from our employees, voluntarily, whatever they wanted to contribute. So we created a kind of a pool of that fund. And this fund was used to support the vendors' employees. So, for example, at our manufacturing plants, where we have a catering service by a caterer, now canteen is not working, it's shut, right? But now what would he do with his employees? He will chuck them out. He'll just ask them to go. So we said, don't do that. We will support you. So we use this funds to support our vendors' employees so that the effect is minimized to an extent. I thought I'll share this example.
It's an excellent example. And I think both examples hit the point, which is, we are going beyond only looking at our own employees or our own lives here, but, the others who are kind of connected with that in purely even a commercial sense. And yet, be able to support them or their employees in many cases. So I think that was very useful to know. My last question is, and take a deep breath. So this is a nice question, which is, and it's a complete original. So this is my thought. Now, people always say, what can HR do for the organization and so on? And my question is, if you were to talk to the CEO and we could ask that, what can the CEO do for HR? Because see, there is an effort that HR makes to quickly respond. So that's agility. We are all going digital with learning and this and that. We are doing everything we can, including interviews and including recruiting people. Everything's happening through that. So there's digital, there's resilience, because we want people to stay stable, be kind of let this pass through, yet develop themselves. So we're doing all this. So my question is, what can the CEO do for HR? And what would be as both as senior leaders, what would be your answer or a sort of a small wish list for that. I wish the others had joined us. I would have wanted to know what they would say, but either one can go first. So just visualize your CEO in front of you and we'll say, okay, this is what I want because we are doing all this.
I think this is a very, very nice question, I would say, when you ask me to visualize. Very, very effective. Yeah, you're right. I think there's a lot of expectation from HR during this time. And they have done a great job. It's not that I'm a HR professional, I would say it, but I really mean when I say it, because they were leading from the front. So we had like something called Rapid Action Force team, RAF team. And we would meet every day, even at the group level, even at Mr. Anand Mahindra's level, we would meet every day to take stock, and that's how we could manage it. So this came not only from HR's efforts, I would say. I think it all came from the senior leadership's efforts, my CEO's efforts, my sector president's effort. If they were not committed, we would have tried our level best. We would have achieved a little bit also, but not this much. Had they not committed to this, that this is how we need to really take it forward.
Yeah, so if I take one thing away from that is that if the CEO said that, what do you want from me? I would say that I would want your continued sponsorship, continued support, continued even ideas so that we can implement them because they have a bigger picture view of the business, its various stakeholders. So I think that's kind of the point here that you made. So I think that makes perfect sense. And we've seen that organizations where the leadership is deeply committed, personally or, a role model person, then those are the places which generally go through this the best. It's a bit like saying you need a charismatic leader in a crisis. So something of that nature. Madhvi, what would you seek?
So my CEO is already doing a lot of stuff, and I can talk about it. So what I'll do is I think you've covered the points there, but I think what I would expect, and what is something that's happening as with my CEO as well. I think he's developing the skill to lead teams virtually. It's always been, banking is a very sort of face-to-face kind of situation. We used to meeting in person. We've been used to working in office. I think the skills that he's rapidly picked up in terms of leading teams virtually, I think is brilliant. Just building a connected organization, So early on, I think he started doing these small group sessions with like 5 or 6 people to just connect with them informally, to understand what the challenges are, help them, and if they had points, take them back for action. I think I think he would need to build cohesion in teams and also engage customers. So the CEO also has, apart from the people obligation, also has a business obligation. I think just how to reach customers remotely and make sure nothing slips on business. I think those are the expectations that I would have. I think.
And you're absolutely right. I think we've seen, ironically in these times, leaders actually going to the last mile much more. On the other hand, you were sitting in your office, even the same thing would happen with me. I won't go out, but then, this happens and then you're trying to reach out to almost anybody down the line. And I think that's been a bit of a shift, and people kind of see that through technology or something, you can make that work. You can make that work.
And because we always tend to think that the leaders have all the answers. The CEO here, he knows all the answers, but it's not like that. The CEO is also evolving, right? For them also, it's the first time to work remotely, manage remote teams. And so I think we've got to appreciate that and help them and also sort of transition to that.
So on a lighter note, and permit me for saying something which is not politically correct, but one of my early roles was a sort of like a EA to a CEO. And somebody asked me, what did you learn? And I said, the only thing I learned was that he didn't have all the answers. And that's what he would tell me directly. Say, I don't know. And I think people. This is the first time people have admitted to saying, I don't know what will happen. I think that's learning. That is progress in its own right. As was a small.
Can I add to that just one line? So I think in today's world, nobody has all the answers. Everything has become so sort of verticalized. I mean, you'll have to consult a bunch of experts to really come to a solution. Sorry, I just want to say that.
No, absolutely.
And one thing I would like to add here, I think this was the best time to show your vulnerabilities to each other. And by doing that, we got more that cohesiveness, more synergy. And I think this was the best time. I think it happened for the right cause, where we all woken up and learned that, yes, we can go beyond. And I think one more thing, going back to CEO or the senior leadership team, ensuring that you are not making any attrition happen at this time. I don't want to use the other words,
Yeah.
And
protecting jobs.
And on top of it, you're giving some increments, like it happened in our sector, where we said, okay, this is the time we need to support our employees. Again, reassuring them, So we use this time to do that. I mean, we do it every year, but I learned that this year many organizations did not go for it for very valid reasons. But in our sector, we did that. And I think it all came from CEO's commitment.
And I think as also the rest of the teams which implement those desires, because everybody's played a contributory role from wherever it begins in the organization. I think I'll stop here for questions, thoughts. I wanted to first of all say we were a truncated group, but that did not stop us from having a stimulating conversation and building new friendships through this. So that is one. I'm fond of Winston Churchill for a degree of reasons, and he had a sort of a quote which I want to close this with before we take up a few questions or thoughts, if any. So he said that, of course, we are looking at change and improvement, and he said that to improve is to change, and to be perfect is to change often again. So I think that the idea is that you are continually, looking at reacting quickly, and I think that's a trait that people should not give up, because we've reacted and we've succeeded to some extent, and the challenges remain. So I think it's an iterative process. It's an iterative reality. So with that, I think I'll stop here. Any questions from anyone or any thoughts? I think we have a few minutes for that. Otherwise, I just want to thank both of them in any case, Seema and Madhvi. And but let's just stop and see if there's anything coming for any of us.
Thank you, Mr. Vikas, Ms. Seema and Madhvi, for that insightful and very honest conversation. And I'm pretty sure all of our participants will have something great as a takeaway from this session. And I definitely would like to make a special mention to three of you for bearing with the technological challenge that we faced today. And you still kept your calm with a smile. You gave such a brilliant session today. It just shows how great leaders you are in your own sectors. And it just makes all of us who are looking at you all and learning just make us feel that we are in the right path and we're looking at the right examples. So thank you very much for that once again. And to all the participants, you have an exciting opportunity to join our speakers on the stage and ask a question directly to them. To do that, you just have to raise your hand. Use the raise hand option there at the bottom of your screen. And if you do so, I will hand over the mic to you and you can join our speakers on the stage and ask a direct question. So please go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to join them on stage. Or you could also type your questions in the Q&A feed and I'll read them out for you. Vikas, Seema and Madhvi, while we get any questions, I think in the feed section, we did have some comments that people had typed in. So they say virtual interviews was a big question mark, and now we've hired all around with virtual interviews only. So if you'd like to, talk about it or just take a moment to, once again, just mention that in brief, and you can do so while we have any questions.
Sure. No, I think it was good to hear that obviously there was a lot of skepticism about virtual interviews, and I said myself included. And obviously virtual interviews, while of course it's worked a lot, but a lot of thought had gone into how do we make virtual interviews effective. So I can just share with the audience in case while we wait for any questions to come through. We actually had a guide on how to do virtual interviews. There are obviously risks around doing virtual interviews. So when I'm in front of the laptop, have I got somebody else, coaching me or whatever? And how do you go around that? How do you ensure that the person you're interviewing is the person who you're supposed to be hiring? So, all those checks and balances have to be put in place. But I think it's working beautifully now. I think it's really good.
Okay, we have a question here from one of our participants, and I'll read it out for you. What are views of panelists on talking blue collar workforce along in a new normal?
On,
do you want me to read that again? It
Yes,
says,
you can.
what are views of panelists on taking blue collar workforce along in the new normal?
Seema, you want to respond to that?
Yes, we have lots of them. We have a lot of associates who work with us, and I think I would like to really appreciate them. They have come a long way with us. They appreciate it. They were there every day, no matter what the COVID situation was, and we have taken them along with us. So, and this is the time we also realize, let me accept that fact, that they are the most important piece in the entire business strategy. So we have come up with something called talent to value kind of concept, so where we really map the person who's having that particular talent with the kind of value we are driving out of him or her for the business. So we use this and really taken them along. Yeah, I don't know about others, but I'm talking about my organization.
I think that seems to be the general sentiment, because in many cases, the blue-collared workers are also the ones who have taken the maximal risk, depending on the industry. So they are the ones who are still out there in many cases, depending on, if you look at workers in the food service industry or whatever, they've been going out for a long time. And it's the white collars who actually entered the formal spaces again later or still work remotely. So I think there's certainly a growing respect for a lot of people who work, especially, I won't just say for blue collar, it extends to even the unorganized sector.
Thank you, Seema. Thank you, Vikas. We have another question. What are your views on how will you look at D&I differently from now on, like engaging with, I'm really sorry, I'm getting a lot of questions, so just going up and down. So just give me a minute while I stick to that and read it again for you. So what are your views on how will you look at D&I differently?
I think she's got disconnected. I think the question is, what are your views on how will you look at D&I differently from now on, like engaging with differently abled or women going on maternity leave, etc. I can start, and Seema, you can add. From our perspective as an organization, I don't think we're going to look at people differently, because for us, diversity and inclusion has been a focus area for a long time. I think we are trying to look at how can we leverage this experience of working from anywhere and attract more people into the workforce, and and that's what our focus area really is. Can we hire more such people, return to work, mothers who've kind of mothers who are not able to work because they have to be at home physically, or people who are taking care of elderly who need to be there, even men, for not just women but men as well. Can we hire them, and of course differently abled people who physically can't come into the workplace. Seema, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I think for us, diversity is always there, okay, because that's a big ticket item, even and part of our purpose, we are there for. But when it comes to inclusivity, I think that's what it has improved over the last 1 year more than before, I would say. Of course, you have different diverse background people there, but when it really now comes to, for example, I shared with you our emergency services, our communication officers coming from very, very rural kind of background, and they supported it. And we have now, going back to your previous question, where blue collar, whether you appreciate them or not, I think that's what the inclusivity is all about. The talent to value, which I talked about, is that. So it has really shifted gears, maybe from 2 to 4 straight, I would say. Back to you, Vikas.
Yeah, I think unless there's space for one more question, otherwise, anything, Mercy, from your end?
Yes, Vikas, we have one more question. Are you okay to take it? We have 2 minutes left in the session.
Sure. So let's take one more question for the panel.
Sure. So it's a question from Mr. Michael, and he asks, what impact is the current situation having on business models per se?
I think, I can speak across sectors, which is that it's variable. First of all, everybody is impacted. There isn't any, obviously, reality on the planet which is not. The interesting thing that at least I note is that there are also sectors which have grown because of this. So there were things like, and Zoom being one example of that, or an equivalent of that. So there are some sectors which have actually had surprising growth. The other thing that we've seen is that there is also the case, as COVID is a little behind us, or there is some vaccine and all that there's also a case for pent-up demand. So there are also systems where you didn't have any sales, or didn't have any activity for a while, and suddenly you see a glut of orders, and therefore there's a supply chain or a production problem. So these are varying from one place to another. The service sector in some cases has been slow, which is back to hotels and all that is less, but it's opening up. And I also see that there are many back and forths. So, sometimes things open up and then they again kind of go back on they go slow again. It's like traffic in a manner of speaking. That seems to be so the experience is variable, between these 2-3 different cases, to my mind.
Absolutely. I think where the opportunities are, they come along with challenges, or likewise, So this challenge came with a lot of opportunities. Now you'll see a lot of different kind of market segment which has opened up, whether it's mask, whether it's sanitizer, whether it's face shield. See the kind of employment opportunity that has also created for these services.
Okay. Thank you once again, Vikas, Seema, and Madhavi. And to all the participants, thank you so much once again for being with us and listening to us. So we've come to an end of the session. I'd like to quickly call out a few things. Please stay with us in the conference. Visit the sessions area once again to look at the upcoming sessions and join us there. And you can also take a look at the lounge area for speed networking, and also networking with people who are on this conference today. And in the arena space, there are sponsor booths. So please visit them and interact with them and talk to them. So thank you very much once again. I hope you all have a great conference. And speakers, I hope you have a great day. Please be with us and join us in other sessions. We hope we'll see you around. Thanks again. Have a great day and evening.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madhavi.
Thank you, both of you.
Thanks, Vikas.
See you. Thank you.
Bye. Take care.